Thank you. All right. Social media. Let me tell you a story. I'm a writer, and a couple years ago I wrote a short story collection. And I was lucky enough to get invited to a number of readings. Some of the readings were at libraries, some were at bookstores, and the best ones were at bars. So I was doing these readings, and I was getting into it. And it kind of gets under your skin, and you want to do more readings. So one day, somebody I knew on Facebook, but I didn't really know them, I just knew them virtually. They posted that there was going to be a poetry reading at somebody's house. So I didn't really know this guy, and it was basically an event set up by somebody I didn't know. So, but I was interested in making a connection because there's not many people that like short stories and poetry in this area. There are, but you know, I don't really know all of them. So, the friend that had posted it was not going. So I messaged the person that was holding the event at their house. And they said, yeah, sure, come on out. It's bring your own beer, you know, just come on out. So the night of the event was postponed 1 week. So I went out, and the next Friday, I get out there, and I'm driving past Marshallton to this address. And I really don't know any of these people. So I'm kind of nervous about it. I'm driving on this backcountry road, and I have my GPS, and I'm pulling up on this backcountry road, and this old dilapidated house with red asbestos siding, and the grass had not been cut, and the porch was, you know, all ripped apart. This is the house, and I'm like, so I pull in the gravel driveway, and I'm like, this is a meth house. I'm like, this is a crack house or something. I'm like, I don't know about this. So I go, I park in the gravel driveway. All the windows all the shades were down, or else there were blankets across the windows. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I had the guts to go in and do this. I don't know these people. So, but I go around to the front door, and it's like 7 o'clock. It's like a great night, the first weekend of September. And I go up the steps, and it's a mess. And I knock on the door. Nobody comes to the door. I knock on the door again. And finally, a guy comes to the door. It's like a young 20s hipster. And he's like squinting like I just woke him up. And he goes, and I said, yeah, I'm Jim. Is the poetry reading here? And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm Mike. He goes, it's not for another hour. So I'm like, oh, shit. And so I said, all right, I'll come back. So I go sit in my car. I'm sitting in my car and waiting for a little while. And all of a sudden, jalopy comes up. An old Honda jalopy comes out. And these two young, vibrant girls in their young 20s pop out with a couple bags of groceries and head inside. So it's almost 8 o'clock. So I go back up to the door, grab my cooler, grab some stories to read, and I go in. And I have to say, these people were gracious. Mike had already, showered and woken up, and these two girls were young and in their 20s. And what I found out is, this wasn't a meth house or a crack house. These were young college students. They had just graduated. Some had graduated, some were still in school. They were living out in the countryside because it's cheaper than living in the borough. And, I don't know if you know, Westchester University has an amazing poetry conference every June. There's a lot of poets and English majors, which is why there's always baristas available at Starbucks, right? Because that's what you do with an English degree. So anyway, but I go in, these young people. Now, the two women, they decide the sun was glorious that day and it was going to set over the hills over these orchards. And they're like, before we do the poetry reading, we got to go out and watch the sunset. So we go running out there, and Mike and I sit back and drink some beers, and we're talking about publishing and writers we love. And the two girls go sit in the weeds and watch the sun setting, which was glorious. But I want to try to define these girls were just so alive with vigor. That was great. And so the sun sets, they come, now let's go read poetry. So we go into the living room, and I sit down on the couch with a beer and my book, and Mike sits next to me, and Mike unfolds this journal that has handwritten poems, like on all 300 pages. That was just amazing. And the two girls sit there, and they asked me if I want to read first, and I'm like, sure. Now, all my stories, for the, a couple of you guys I know have read them, are, it's middle-aged angst, existential, there's a story about a couple that can't bear children, a guy that is haunted by his ex-wife. There's stories about, a guy that has an affair and then can't look his wife in the face. They're like really deep, dark, existential angst. They'd make Camus slit his wrist, right? And so I read the first one and I look up and, the one girl, Megan's looking at me and she's like, wow. And I can tell she's not being ironic. She really thought, she liked it. But then we go around the room and Michael's poems are incredible. And Megan's and her friends, who I don't remember her name, but Megan and her friend are reading these, they're all 20-something, broke college students, and they're reading these love poems about the love of life and how life is so glorious. And then, so we get around, they read their three, and then I'm reading another one about a, disaffected middle-aged man, and we just go around the room, and we're drinking beer, and we are just, and I walked out of there after listening to these splendid poems by these beautiful young people, with a renewed vigor of life and what it means to be broke and poor when you're 20 years old. And, and it struck me as I walked out of there that I was afraid to walk in that building, afraid to walk into that dilapidated house and see what I'd find. And I walked out with really some of the great memories. So it was a great night. Thanks.